Okay, so MLB The Show 25 just came out about a few days ago. I've been playing for about a week, and I've got a few tips here I've compiled that I just want to show real quickly. So the first thing I want to show is the camera. So, what camera option should I have while pitching? I used to use, let's see, broadcast. Here's why you should not be using broadcast. You are not seeing the pitch from the hitter's perspective. And that's very important, being able to see the pitch from the hitter's perspective. So that is why I recommend using strike zone. Now, using strike zone, again, that allows you to see how the hitter sees. And that is important because you get to see how the pitch moves and how it breaks from the hitter's perspective. So I would definitely recommend using strike zone instead of something like outfield or broadcast. Strike zone, you'll see a lot of highly skilled players online using that, and simply just for the reason you get to see how the pitch moves from the hitter's perspective, and that will guide you as you pitch along your games. As you pitch, you will learn which pitches are best for your pitcher, because you get to see their movement and how they're moving against and breaking against that batter. So I would certainly use strike zone. Next, let's go into pitching here. Let's go to the interface. So I use Pulse. I just always use that. It's not that great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. You can be good with Pulse, but I would recommend Pinpoint. Pinpoint is the hardest one to use, but it is the most accurate. I really want to stress you need to learn how to use, especially if you're new coming to the game, to start with Pinpoint. I don't use it, so here, let's see how I do with this. This is just a simple fastball, but basically what you want to do is on the top, it'll give you a little example of how to move your right joystick, and that'll guide where your pitch goes. See, that was not great. I don't use Pinpoint. Even just a simple movement like that, not great. I went a little bit too fast there. I went a bit to the left, went too early. Here, let me try. That's a little bit better, but I still went a little bit too fast. Here, I'll do it one more try. Too slow there. All right. But once you master that, you will become the best version of yourself as a pitcher that you can be. So I really want to stress for pitching, you should be using Pinpoint. If you're looking for more simple versions of pitching, I'd recommend Meter or Pure Analog. Or you could even, don't use Classic, or you could even use Pulse. That's just what I use. At some point, I'll probably switch, but I've just been using that for my entire life, so I just have the Pulse. Next, practice. So obviously you want to be doing a lot of practice. I wouldn't recommend doing a lot of offline practice, and the reason why is because hitters offline, the CPU, obviously are not as good as the hitters online. So I'd recommend doing just a lot of practice online. That'll teach you how to be a way better pitcher. You'll learn how people generally hit and what general weaknesses and strengths are once you pitch online. So here's a little bit of the meta you probably know. I'm going to go into that, and then I'll go into a little bit of what you can do offline. So here, let me get into the meta. First, so you want to be using sinkers and cutters. Sinkers, you generally want to be using them inside and down and in on hitters. That did not go where I wanted it to, but you want to be using sinkers down and in, like this. That's okay, well, that didn't go where I wanted it to, but anyways, you want to be using sinkers down and in. People generally have a hard time hitting those, and you want to be using cutters. So when you're using a cutter, you want to throw a cutter so it moves in on the batter. So let me go to another pitcher who throws a cutter. So for this example, righty-lefty, I would want to throw a cutter so it's moving in on the batter like that. Those are a little bit harder to hit and see than a pitch like this, cutter like right here, that starts outside and comes in a bit. That's just going to move right into their PCI. So I'd recommend just throwing a cutter so it moves in the batter. It usually jams them. Next, you got to mix your pitches. You cannot be throwing the same pitches every time. You want to mix between fastballs, breaking balls, and you got to be throwing them in the corners. You cannot be leaving them over the fat part of the plate. You've got to be putting them on the corners. Even that right there could be a hittable pitch on line, even though it's on the black. It's a little bit down the middle, so you want to be throwing them in the corners. Uh, I've noticed online people are usually not that great at hitting up and in, especially lefty-lefty. But if you throw that too often, they will hit that really well. They will smash that. So you got to mix your pitches. I also recommend not throwing low fastballs. Um, Guys seem to hit that really well in line. And don't be starting with the same pitch. I have a problem on one where I start with a high and in fastball, and I tend to pound inside, and guys will pick that up and they will hit that. So you should be starting with a different pitch every time. You should not be starting the same location. Guys online will pick that up, so you gotta be good about that. Next, learn through your game. Learn about your opponent's weakness as you're playing the game. So as you're going through your online game, you will start to notice certain pitches and certain locations that your opponent is not good at hitting. You've got to take advantage of that if you want to limit runs. You've got to pitch to those locations and use their weaknesses against them. Next, this is the last tip, pitch tunneling. This is a little bit more complicated, but essentially what it is you're going to throw a pitch in one location, and then your next pitch, you're going to throw it so it starts the same way that last pitch starts, but it ends up a different part of the zone. To make the pitches look virtually the same, but they end up changing. They end up breaking differently. So, basically, an example of this. Let's say I throw a fastball right here for my first pitch. So my next pitch, you might want to throw a sinker. It's going to go a little bit down here. The thing is with the sinker, though, is it's going to look as if it's starting a little bit higher, just like my previous pitch, a fastball, but it's going to sink lower. So it's going to end up in a different location. So here, let me give you another example of that. If I throw a fastball right here, inside, my next pitch will be a cutter in the same location. It's going to start in that same location as you saw there, but it's going to end up a little bit more inside. So they're going to remember this first pitch was right here. It's going to start right there and end right here. That cutter is going to start right here, but it's going to end right here, and their PCI will likely be a little bit over here, and they will likely not have a perfect PCI placement unless they're expecting you to tunnel, but oftentimes you're going to fool the hitter. That is something that pitchers do in real life, and that is what you should be doing in the game. So strike zone is another great way to learn how to tunnel, the strike zone viewpoint. It's a little bit harder to tunnel with broadcast, so I'd really recommend, again, using strike zone. It's easier to see the pitch movement, and it's easier for tunneling. But those are just my general pitching tips, I'm sorry. Let me know if you have any questions about that, especially on tunneling. I know tunneling can be a little bit complicated, but pitching is a little bit more simple than hitting, to be honest, and people generally just aren't as good at pitching online than they are offline. That's why a lot of games are high scoring. Guys generally are better at hitting than pitching, so if you're not great at pitching, these are some general tips to look at, but don't get too flustered about it. Just practice, and really, if you're not good at pitching, gotta be good at hitting. So you gotta be able to score more runs than your opponent. But that is basically just some simple pitching tips. Let me know again if you guys have any questions about them, if you want any more tips. But yeah, that's about it.